The silence was the loudest thing in the room. It was a thick, heavy blanket that smothered the leftover sounds of laughter and music from just a few hours ago. The air still smelled like grilled hot dogs and cheap beer. A ghost of the party. Empty red plastic cups were scattered across the counters and floor. Some standing, some tipped over in sad little puddles. Paper plates with hardened ketchup stains were stacked precariously on the coffee table. It was the kind of mess that signaled a good time had been had by all. But all I felt was a cold, clean emptiness. My own voice echoed in my head. A recording stuck on a loop. She's pregnant, and Leo is the father. I stared at the wall, at a framed photo of my sister and me from last summer, our arms thrown around each other, smiling so wide it looked like our faces might crack. We looked happy. We looked unbreakable. A strange calm settled over me, the kind that comes after the hurricane has passed and you're left standing in the wreckage. The storm inside me had blown itself out, leaving nothing but this chilling, quiet resolve. But that was the end. The beginning was only a few weeks ago, when the world still made sense, when the biggest problem in my life was figuring out how to cover Maya's share of the rent, without her noticing. Our apartment wasn't much, just a 2-bedroom walk-up above a laundromat in Brookfield, Pennsylvania. The floors creaked, the pipes groaned in the winter, and the whole place constantly smelled faintly of fabric softener. But it was ours. It was our sanctuary, the little kingdom we'd built after Maya finally had enough of living under our parents' roof. I'd been living on my own for a year, working double shifts at the daily grind coffee shop, saving every penny. When Maya called me crying back in April, after another screaming match with Dad, I didn't hesitate. "Come live with me," I said. And just like that, she did. Our lives fell into a comfortable rhythm. I was the early bird, my alarm buzzing at 5 in the morning. I'd tiptoe round the small kitchen, making coffee, the smell of it filling the apartment. I'd always leave a mug for her on the counter, just the way she liked it, lots of milk, 2 sugars. Maya was the night owl. She'd just graduated high school and was in what she called her gap summer, which mostly meant sleeping until noon and binge-watching reality TV. I didn't mind. I remembered being 18, that terrifying feeling of standing on a cliff with the whole world spread out below you, having no idea which way to jump. She needed time. I could give her that. "Chloe, did you take my gray sweater?" She'd call out from her room around midday, her voice still thick with sleep. "It's on the chair in my room." I'd yell back from the living room, where I'd be paying bills at our tiny dining table, the one with the paint stain on the sleeve. "That's my favorite one." She'd groan, but a minute later she'd appear in the doorway, wearing the sweater, a sheepish grin on her face. "Thanks." She was my shadow, my echo. We looked alike, with the same dark, wavy hair from our mom and the same stubborn chin from our dad. But she was the softer version of me, where my edges were sharp and defined by responsibility. Hers were still blurry with youth. I protected her. That was my job. I had been doing it since she was born. I made sure the rent was paid, the fridge was stocked, and that she never had to see how close we sometimes were to not making it. All she had to do was figure out who she wanted to be. And then there was Leo. Leo was my boyfriend. We'd been together for almost a year, ever since he'd started coming into the coffee shop every morning. He'd order a large black coffee and lean against the counter, flashing that easy, lopsided smile that made my stomach do a little flip. He had a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the world. He was charming and funny, and he was the first person who saw me as more than just Maya's responsible older sister. He saw me. When Maya moved in, I was worried it would be weird, that he'd feel crowded out, but Leo folded her into our life seamlessly. He'd bring over pizza on Friday nights, and the 3 of us would cram onto our worn-out sofa, arguing over what movie to watch. He'd listen to Maya's rambling stories about her friends with genuine interest. He'd help her with her half-hearted job applications, making her laugh when she got frustrated. "You've got this, May," he'd say, nudging her shoulder. "They'd be crazy not to hire you." He became part of our little family. He was the stable, fun-loving big brother she'd never had, and the caring, attentive boyfriend I'd always wanted. Sometimes I'd watch them, the two of them joking on the couch while I was cooking dinner, and a warmth would spread through my chest. This was it. This was my life. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was happy. I was taking care of my sister. I was in love, and we were saving up to move into a bigger place in the fall, a place with a real balcony and maybe even a dishwasher. We were a team, the three of us, unbreakable. Looking back, the signs were there. They were tiny, little hairline fractures in the foundation that you wouldn't notice unless you were looking for them. I wasn't looking. I didn't want to see them. There was the way Maya's eyes would linger on Leo a second too long when he wasn't looking. I dismissed it as a simple crush, the kind a younger sister gets on her older sister's cool boyfriend. It was innocent. There was the way Leo would sometimes get quiet and distant after I talked about our future, about the new apartment, or my plans to go back to community college. He'd just smile and change the subject. I told myself he was just a live-in-the-moment kind of guy, that he didn't like to plan too far ahead. It was just his personality. There were the little secrets, an inside joke between them I wasn't a part of, a quick, shared glance across the dinner table that I couldn't quite decipher. I'd feel a flicker of something, annoyance, jealousy, but I'd push it down immediately. I was being ridiculous, paranoid. They lived together. Of course they were close. I wanted them to be close. It was better this way. It made my life easier. One afternoon, I came home from work early. My shift cut short because the espresso machine broke down. I walked in to find them sitting on the floor, surrounded by old photo albums. My photo albums. Look at this one. Maya was laughing, holding up a picture of me in middle school. All braces and frizzy hair. You look like such a nerd. Chloe. Leo was smiling. A genuine, warm smile. I think she looks cute, he said, his eyes meeting mine as I stood in the doorway. He winked. My heart did its usual little flip. See, I told myself, nothing to worry about. They were just bonding. What are you guys doing? I asked, dropping my bag on the floor and kicking off my shoes. Just taking a trip down memory lane, Leo said, patting the floor next to him. Maya was showing me your greatest hits. I sat down, leaning against him as Maya flipped to another page. It was a picture of the two of us at the beach, maybe 10 years ago. I had my arm around a much smaller Maya, shielding her from a wave. She was clinging to my side, her face a mixture of fear and excitement. I remember that day. Maya said softly, I was so scared of the ocean, but you told me you wouldn't let anything happen to me, and I didn't, I said, squeezing her hand. Leo wrapped his arm around my shoulders. You've always been a good big sister, haven't you? I leaned my head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne. I try. In that moment, everything felt perfect. It felt solid, real. The three of us, sitting on the floor of our cheap apartment, surrounded by memories. I felt a surge of love so powerful it almost hurt. I loved my sister. I loved my boyfriend. And I loved the life we were building together. I was so blissfully, stupidly unaware that I was sitting in a room with two people who were systematically destroying it. The truth was already there, hiding behind their smiles, and I was about to walk right into it. The change in Maya was gradual at first. It started a few weeks after that day with the photo albums. She started sleeping more, not just until noon, but sometimes until 2 or 3 in the afternoon. When she was awake, she was quiet, withdrawn. The easy laughter that usually filled our apartment disappeared, replaced by a tense silence. She'd pick at her food, her eyes constantly darting towards her phone. Everything okay, May? I asked one evening. We were eating takeout Chinese food on the couch, an old Friday night tradition. She'd barely touched her lo mein. She jumped, as if my question had startled her. Yeah, fine. Just tired. You've been tired a lot lately. She shrugged, pushing noodles around her container with a plastic fork. Just post-graduation blues. I guess. It's weird not having a routine. It sounded plausible. I let it go. But the feeling that something was wrong lingered. A cold knot in the pit of my stomach. She started avoiding me. She'd be in her room with the door closed whenever I was home. If I knocked, she'd call out that she was busy or trying to sleep. She stopped asking to borrow my clothes. She stopped leaving her empty tea mugs on the coffee table. It was like she was trying to erase herself from our shared spaces. She started getting sick in the mornings. I'd hear her in the bathroom, the sound of retching muffled by the closed door. When I'd ask if she was okay, she'd blame it on bad takeout or a stomach bug. Maybe you should see a doctor, I suggested, my voice tight with worry. I'm fine. Chloe. Gone. Stop mothering me. She snapped. The harshness in her tone stunned me into silence. Maya never snapped at me. We argued. Sure, like all sisters do. But there was a cruelty in her voice that was new. It felt like she was pushing me away, building a wall between us brick by brick. I tried talking to Leo about it. Have you noticed anything weird with Maya lately? She seems off. We were in my car, on the way to the grocery store. He was staring out the passenger window, his fingers drumming restlessly on his knee. I don't know. Seems like the same old Maya to me. Probably just teen angst or something. He said it casually. Too casually. He didn't meet my eyes. It feels like more than that. I pressed. I'm worried about her. She's a big girl. Chloe. She can take care of herself. You can't solve all her problems for her. He finally turned to look at me, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. Don't you ever get tired of being the responsible one? His words stung, mostly because they were true. I was tired. I was tired of worrying. Tired of feeling like the entire weight of our little world rested on my shoulders. But what choice did I have? The distance between me and Maya grew into a chasm. The silence in the apartment became heavier, thick with unspoken things. I felt like I was living with a stranger. My funny, carefree little sister had been replaced by the sullen, secretive ghost who haunted the edges of my life. And Leo was there. But he wasn't. He was more like a visitor. His charming smile a mask I was suddenly beginning to see the cracks in. The happy little team of three was falling apart, and I was the only one who seemed to notice or care. I felt incredibly, deeply alone. I kept telling myself it was a phase, that whatever was wrong would eventually pass. I just had to wait it out. I had no idea that the storm was already gathering, and I was standing right in its path. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. It was a miserably hot and humid day in late June, the kind where the air feels like wet wool and every breath is a chore. I'd been on my feet for 8 hours straight, dealing with a never-ending stream of grumpy customers wanting iced lattes. My boss, a kind but stressed-out woman named Maria, took one look at my exhausted face and sent me home 2 hours early. Go on, Chloe, she'd said. You look like you're about to collapse. We can handle the evening rush. I was so grateful I could have hugged her. All I wanted was a cold shower and an hour of blessed silence before Maya or Leo got home. As I turned my key in the lock, I expected that silence. I expected the apartment to be empty and still. But I heard voices from inside. Whispers. They were low and urgent, coming from Maya's bedroom. For a second, I just stood there in the doorway, my keys still in my hand. My first thought was that she was on the phone with one of her friends. But then I recognized the other voice, a low male murmur that sent a jolt of ice through my veins. It was Leo. He was supposed to be at his construction job for another 3 hours. My heart started hammering against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. I didn't call out. I didn't announce I was home. I slipped my shoes off as quietly as I could, my movements slow and deliberate, like a predator stalking its prey. I set my bag down on the floor without a sound. The floorboards creaked under my weight as I crept down the short hallway toward her room. The door was closed, but not all the way. A thin sliver of light escaped from the crack. I leaned in, holding my breath. My ear pressed against the cool wood. "Can't keep doing this," Maya was saying, her voice thin and reedy, laced with panic. "She's going to find out. Leo, she's already suspicious. The way she looks at me. She doesn't know anything." Leo's voice was a low rumble, meant to be soothing, but it was edged with an impatience that made my skin crawl. "Just act normal. You're being paranoid." "Paranoid? I'm sick every single morning. I can barely eat. How long do you think I can hide this? I'm pregnant. Leo, this isn't just going to go away." The word hung in the air between them. Pregnant. It seemed to suck all the oxygen out of the hallway. I felt my knees go weak. My hand flew to my mouth to stifle a gasp. I couldn't breathe. The world tilted, the hallway stretching and warping before my eyes. It felt like I was drowning. "Keep your voice down," he hissed. "Do you want her to hear you?" "I don't know what to do," she sobbed. A raw, desperate sound that scraped against my nerves. "I can't tell her. She'll hate me. She'll never forgive me. Our parents will kill me. My life will be over." "It's not over," he said, but his voice lacked any real conviction. "We'll figure it out. We can look into options. A clinic or something. Nobody has to know. A clinic." He was talking about an abortion. He was standing in my home, in my sister's bedroom, calmly discussing how to get rid of the baby he had conceived with her, all while dating me. The betrayal was so absolute, so monumental. It was almost surreal. It wasn't just that they had slept together. It was the weeks of lies, every shared meal, every movie night, every casual conversation was a performance. My entire reality, the happy little life I thought I was building, was a carefully constructed lie. I was the fool, the audience of one, applauding their deceit. "I'm so scared," she whispered. "We'll be okay," he said. Just pull yourself together. Chloe will be home soon." I pulled back from the door, my body moving on its own. I stumbled back into the living room, my vision blurry. I sank onto the couch, my limbs numb and heavy, as if they belonged to someone else. The sounds from the bedroom faded into a dull buzz. My mind was a white-hot blank. I couldn't feel sadness. I couldn't feel anger. I felt nothing at all. It was a terrifying, hollow void where my heart used to be. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, just staring at the scuff marks on the opposite wall. Then I heard her bedroom door open. I heard their footsteps. I didn't turn. "Oh, Chloe." Maya's voice was falsely bright, the cheerfulness so forced it was grotesque. "You're home early." I heard her stop. I could feel her eyes on me, could feel her panic rising as she took in my stillness, my silence. Leo cleared his throat. "Hey, babe, your boss let you off? That's great." I finally turned my head. Slowly, I looked at them. They were standing a few feet apart, a guilty distance between them. Maya was clutching her stomach, a gesture I now understood with sickening clarity. Leo had his hands shoved in his pockets, his shoulders hunched. He couldn't meet my eyes. They looked like two strangers caught doing something shameful, and I suppose they were. A cold, calm clarity washed over me, displacing the numbness. The hurricane of emotion I should have been feeling was eerily absent. In its place was a quiet, chilling certainty. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of a messy, dramatic confrontation where they could beg and plead and try to explain away their treachery. They didn't deserve my tears. They didn't deserve my rage. They deserved to be exposed. They deserved to have their dirty secret ripped out into the light for everyone to see. I gave them a small, tight smile. It felt alien on my face. "Yeah," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the chaos inside me. Maria let me go. It was a slow day. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, my movements fluid and unhurried. I opened the fridge and took out a bottle of water. My hands weren't even shaking. I could feel their confused, wary eyes following me. "Are you okay?" Maya asked, her voice trembling slightly. "You're being quiet." I took a long drink of water before answering. I turned to face them. leaning back against the counter. I let my eyes drift from her pale, worried face to his guilty, downcast one. Just tired, I said. Long day. Relief washed over their features. It was so obvious, so pathetic. They thought they had gotten away with it. They thought I was still their fool. The idea of what I was about to do began to take shape in my mind. A dark and beautiful flower blooming in the wreckage of my heart. I needed a stage. I needed an audience. I needed to burn their world down just like they had burned down mine. An email had come through that morning. I'd glanced at it and forgotten about it until now. Aunt Carol, organizing the annual Miller family 4th of July BBQ. It was the biggest family event of the year. Everyone would be there. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, all the cousins. A perfect storm of judgment and gossip. A perfect place for a secret to explode. Hey, I said, my voice casual, conversational. Did you guys see Aunt Carol's email? About the 4th of July party? Maya and Leo exchanged a quick, nervous glance. No. I haven't checked my email today. Maya mumbled. Well, it's happening, I said, my smile widening just a fraction. Same as always. Her place. She wants an RSVP by the end of the week. I looked directly at Leo. You'll come, right? Everyone loves having you there. He swallowed hard, finally looking at me. Yeah, of course. Wouldn't miss it. Good, I said. I looked at Maya, whose face was a mask of confusion and fear. She knew something was wrong, but she couldn't put her finger on it. She just knew that the sister who was supposed to fly into a rage was instead planning a party, and that was so much more terrifying. We should bring something, I continued, the plan crystallizing in my mind. Sharp and perfect, maybe that 7-layer dip you make. May. Everyone loves that. She just nodded. Mute. I pushed myself off the counter. I'm going to go take a shower. I feel gross. I walked past them, close enough to smell the cloying scent of Maya's perfume mixed with the faint, familiar scent of Leo's deodorant. The combination made me want to be sick. As I closed the bathroom door behind me, I caught my reflection in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes dark and empty, but there was a flicker of something else in them, something hard and resolute. They had made their choice when they decided to lie to me, to betray me in my own home. Now, I was making mine. I wasn't going to let a guy come between me and my sister. No, I was going to let the truth do that, and I was going to make sure it happened in front of our entire family. So there was no escape, no denial, and no going back. The 4th of July wasn't just going to have fireworks. It was going to be an explosion. And I was the one holding the match. The days leading up to the party were the strangest of my life. I moved through them like an actor playing a part. The part was Chloe, the loving girlfriend, the caring sister. I performed my role flawlessly. I made coffee for Maya in the morning. I asked Leo about his day at work. We watched a movie one night, the three of us on the couch, the same way we always had. But now, a thick pane of glass separated me from them. I could see them, hear them, but I couldn't feel anything. The warmth I used to feel was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating detachment. They were both walking on eggshells around me, on their best behavior. They must have thought my strange mood on Tuesday was just a fleeting moment of stress. They were so desperate to believe their lie was safe that they ignored the warning signs. They ignored the fact that my laughter never quite reached my eyes, that my touch was hesitant, that my smiles were as thin as ice. The day before the party, Maya found me in the kitchen, making potato salad. "Can I help?" she asked quietly. "Sure," I said, not looking up from the potatoes I was dicing. "You can chop the celery." We worked in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the rhythmic tap of our knives on the cutting board. "Chloe," she finally said, her voice small. "Are we okay?" I stopped chopping. I placed my knife down carefully and turned to face her. I looked into her eyes, so much like my own, and for a fleeting second, the actress faltered. I saw my little sister, the girl I had protected her whole life, and a wave of grief washed over me. I almost broke. I almost told her I knew. I almost begged her to tell me why. But then I remembered the whispers I'd heard through her door. I remembered the cold, dismissive way Leo had talked about a clinic, and the hardness snapped back into place. "Of course we're okay," I said, my voice smooth as silk. "Why wouldn't we be?" She searched my face, looking for a crack in the facade. Finding none, she gave me a weak, relieved smile. "No reason. I'm just glad." "Me too." I lied. The lie didn't even make me flinch. I was getting good at it. I had learned from the best. As I turned back to my potatoes, I felt a grim satisfaction. She had no idea what was coming. Neither of them did. They were walking straight into the trap I had set. And tomorrow, I was going to spring it. At Carol's backyard was the quintessential picture of an all-American 4th of July. Red, white, and blue streamers were strung between the trees, fluttering in the humid breeze. A massive grill smoked away in the corner, presided over by my Uncle Mark, who took his BBQ duties with the solemnity of a 4-star general. The air was thick with the smell of sizzling burgers, sunscreen, and freshly cut grass. Kids shrieked and chased each other with water guns, their laughter mixing with the classic rock playing from a portable speaker. The whole scene was so painfully, perfectly normal it felt like a movie set. And I was the saboteur, waiting for my cue. We arrived right on time, a feat in itself. I carried the potato salad. Maya held her 7-layer dip, and Leo trailed behind us with a cooler of beer. I played my part, smiling and hugging relatives, accepting compliments on my potato salad. "Oh, it's nothing," I'd say with a practiced modesty that made my stomach turn. I watched Maya and Leo out of the corner of my eye. They were trying so hard. Too hard. Leo was laughing a little too loudly at Uncle Mark's bad jokes. Maya was clinging to my side. A bright, brittle smile plastered on her face. They looked like two people trying to outrun their own shadows. Every so often, their eyes would meet across the yard. A quick, frantic exchange that screamed guilt. No one else seemed to notice. They were all too caught up in the cheerful chaos of the day. But I saw it all. I was collecting every lie, every stolen glance, filing them away as fuel for the fire I was about to start. My cousin Sarah, who was more like a friend than a cousin, found me by the drink table. She was the only person I felt a pang of regret about deceiving. She knew me better than anyone, and she could tell something was off. "You okay, Chloe?" she asked, her brow furrowed with concern as she handed me a cup of lemonade. "You seem a million miles away." "Just tired," I said, the light tasting like ash in my mouth. "Work's been crazy." She didn't look convinced. "And what's with them?" She nodded discreetly towards Maya and Leo, who were standing awkwardly by the grill. "They look like they're about to face a firing squad." "No idea," I said, shrugging. The ease with which I lied to her scared me a little. "Maybe they're just hot." She gave me one last searching look before letting it go. "Well, if you need to talk, I'm here." "I know," I said, and for the first time that day, I meant it. "Thanks, Sarah." As the afternoon wore on, the heat and the beer made everyone relaxed and complacent. The sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the lawn. The kids were getting tired, their shrieks softening to whines. Uncle Mark announced that the burgers were ready. This was it. This was the moment. The whole family, all 30 or so of us, started to gather round the picnic tables, filling their plates, laughing and talking. Everyone was in one place. My audience was assembled. I felt a strange calm descend over me. The nervous energy that had been thrumming under my skin all day vanished, replaced by a cold, steady purpose. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. I felt completely, utterly in control. I picked up a plastic fork and tapped it against my cup, the sharp clinking sound cutting through the chatter. One by one, heads turned towards me. My dad smiled, probably thinking I was about to make a sweet toast. Maya and Leo both froze, their forks halfway to their mouths. their faces etched with a sudden, dawning horror. They knew. In that instant, they knew that the game was over. "Hi everyone," I began, my voice clear and even. It didn't waver. "Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to say a few words. Since we're all here together." I paused, letting the silence settle. I looked around at the faces staring back at me. My parents, my grandparents, my aunts and uncles, all my cousins, my family. Family is so important. I continued, my eyes finding Maya's. Her face had gone chalk white. It's about trust. It's about honesty. It's about knowing you have people who will always have your back, no matter what. I let the words hang in the air, heavy with irony. A few people nodded in agreement. Aunt Carol looked misty-eyed. "And it's also about sharing in each other's joys," I said, a slow, deliberate smile spreading across my face. It felt sharp, like broken glass, celebrating the big moments, the new beginnings, which is why I am so happy to be the one to share some wonderful news with all of you. I could see Leo slowly backing away from the table, his eyes wide with panic. He looked like a cornered animal. Maya was shaking her head, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement, her eyes pleading with me. "Don't. Please, don't." I ignored her. I raised my cup. "It turns out, we have another reason to celebrate this year. We're going to have a new addition to the family." I beamed at them all. "My amazing little sister, Maya, is pregnant." A beat of stunned silence, and then the yard erupted. Squeals of delight, gasps, a smattering of applause. My mom's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears of joy. My dad looked shocked, but a slow grin was spreading across his face. Aunt Carol was already on her feet, rushing towards a shell-shocked Maya to give her a hug. I let the happy chaos swell for a moment, savoring it. I watched Maya get swallowed up by well-meaning relatives, her face a mask of pure terror. I watched Leo, who had managed to retreat to the edge of the patio, looking for an escape route. Then, I delivered the final blow. I raised my voice just enough to be heard over the commotion. "And," I said, my voice dropping, becoming as cold and hard as a block of ice, "I think we should all congratulate the father." I turned and pointed my plastic cup directly at Leo, my boyfriend. Leo, if the first announcement had caused an explosion, this one was a nuclear bomb. The happy chatter died instantly. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Every single person turned to stare, first at a frozen Leo, then at a sobbing Maya, and finally, at me, standing there with a serene, empty smile on my face. The silence that followed was absolute. It was deafening. It was the sound of a family breaking. It was the sound of two lives being utterly and completely ruined. And it was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. Uncle Mark dropped his spatula. It clattered loudly on the stone patio. My mother's joyful expression crumpled into one of horrified disbelief. My father's face darkened with a rage I hadn't seen since I was a child. He took a step towards Leo, his fists clenched. That was all it took for Leo to bolt. He didn't say a word. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Maya. He just turned and ran. He scrambled around the side of the house, and a moment later, we heard the squeal of his car tires as he peeled out of the driveway and disappeared. He just ran. He left the mess, the screaming, the crying, the entire catastrophe, for us to deal with. The cowardice of it was so profound. It was almost impressive. With Leo gone, all eyes turned to Maya. She was standing in the middle of the lawn, Aunt Carol's arms still loosely around her, looking small and lost. Then her knees buckled. She crumpled to the ground, her body racked with deep, gut-wrenching sobs. "Chloe, no," she choked out between gasps. "Please, please. I'm so sorry. Don't hate me." My parents rushed to her, but not with comfort. My father grabbed her by the arm, hauling her roughly to her feet. The sobs caught in her throat as she stared up at him, her face streaked with tears and dirt. "Get up," he snarled, his voice low and guttural with a fury that silenced the entire yard. "You will not make a scene. You have shamed this family enough for one day." My mother was just standing there, her hands fluttering uselessly at her sides, her face a mess of conflicting emotions, disbelief, pain, and a deep, mortifying shame. She looked from my father's furious face to Maya's crumpled one. Then her eyes found mine across the lawn. The look she gave me wasn't one of anger. Not yet. It was something far worse. It was a look of profound, shattering disappointment. It was the look you give someone you no longer recognize. That was my cue to leave. I had lit the fuse and watched the explosion. I had no interest in staying to sift through the rubble. I turned my back on the tableau of my ruined family, raging father, my broken mother, my sobbing sister. I walked away without a word. I could feel every eye on my back, 100 questions and judgments boring into me. I heard Aunt Carol's voice rise, sharp and commanding. "Robert, for God's sake, let the girl go. This is family business, not a public spectacle." I didn't turn around. I kept walking, my steps even and measured. I walked past the smoking grill, past the table laden with food no one would eat now, past the deflating patriotic balloons. I walked out of the yard, down the driveway, and didn't stop until I was in my car. I locked the doors and sat for a moment in the suffocating silence, my hands gripping the steering wheel. The sounds of the party were muffled, distant. It was like watching a disaster through thick glass. My reflection in the rearview mirror was a stranger, a pale, calm girl with eyes as hard and empty as stones. There were no tears. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel guilty. I just felt quiet. The storm inside me had passed, leaving behind a vast, clean emptiness. I started the car and pulled away from the curb, driving with methodical care. I didn't speed. I signaled at every turn. It was as if by controlling this one small thing, I could keep the rest of the world from crashing in on me. I drove through the familiar streets of our town, past houses with American flags on their porches and kids setting off firecrackers in the street. A normal town, having a normal holiday. My own world had just ended, but the rest of the world spun on, oblivious. I knew I couldn't go back to the apartment. It wasn't my home anymore. It was a crime scene, tainted by their secrets. There was only one place to go. I pulled out my phone and dialed Sarah's number. She answered on the second ring. "Chloe, what the hell is going on? Everyone is freaking out." Her voice was a rush of frantic energy. "Can I come over?" I asked, my voice flat. "Yeah, of course. But what happened?" "Your dad." "I can't talk about it right now." I cut her off. I need a place to be. Can I please just come over?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then a sigh. "Okay," she said, her voice softening. "Okay, Chloe, come on over." The doors unlocked. I hung up without saying goodbye. Sarah lived in a small house on the other side of town that she shared with 2 other girls from college. When I walked in, she was waiting for me in the living room, perched on the edge of an armchair, chewing on her thumbnail. She took one look at my face and her expression shifted from anxious curiosity to deep concern. "Oh, Chloe," she breathed. I couldn't stand the pity in her eyes. I walked past her into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, my back to her. "You wanted to tell me what that was?" she asked gently, following me. I drank the entire glass of water in one go, the cold liquid doing nothing to soothe the tightness in my chest. I set the glass down in the sink with a soft clink. I turned around and leaned against the counter. "She's pregnant," I said. The words came out easily, clinically, as if I were describing a stranger. "With Leo's baby. They've been sleeping together for weeks, maybe longer. In my apartment. In our home." Sarah's jaw dropped. "Oh my God. Are you serious?" I gave a short, bitter laugh that sounded ugly in the quiet kitchen. "Deadly. And you told everyone? At the party?" "I did," I said. I watched her face, waiting for the judgment. She just stared at me, processing it. She ran a hand through her hair. "Wow," she said finally. That's biblical. Chloe. I mean, holy crap, She wasn't judging me. Not yet. Anyway, she was just stunned by the sheer, brutal efficiency of my revenge. He ran. I added, the detail feeling important. The second I said his name, he just bolted. Didn't even say goodbye. Of course he did. Sarah scoffed. He's a coward. Always has been. She paused, her eyes searching mine. How are you doing? For real? I'm fine, I said. She raised an eyebrow. No, you're not. I will be. I amended. I just need to not be there. Can I stay here? Just for a night or two? Until I figure things out. You can stay as long as you need, she said without hesitation. You know that. The guest room is all yours. Just then, my phone, which I had placed on the counter, buzzed to life. The screen lit up with my mom's name. I stared at it, my stomach clenching. I let it go to voicemail. A second later, a text message popped up. Chloe, call me right now. We need to talk about this. I ignored it. Then the phone buzzed again. My dad. I silenced the ringer. Then came a barrage of texts. One from my mom. One from my dad. One from Aunt Carol. All caps. What you did was cruel and unforgivable. And then, one from a number I didn't recognize. But I knew who it was from. Please talk to me. Chloe. Please. I'm so sorry. Maya. I picked up the phone and held down the power button, not even bothering to read the rest. I watched the screen go black. It felt like severing a final chord. I had done what I set out to do. I had exposed them. I had burned everything to the ground. Now I just wanted to be left alone in the ashes. Good call, Sarah said, nodding at my dark phone. You don't have to talk to any of them until you're ready. She led me to the small guest room at the back of the house. It was simple, with a single bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out onto a quiet, tree-lined street. It was peaceful. It was safe. She brought me a clean towel and a t-shirt to sleep in. Get some rest, she said from the doorway. Try not to think about it. But as I lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring up at the ceiling in the dark, thinking was all I could do, I replayed the scene in the backyard over and over in my head. The shock on everyone's faces. The delicious, terrible silence. Leo's panicked flight. Maya's crumpled form on the grass. The sound of her sobs. I had wanted to hurt them. And I had succeeded. Beyond my wildest dreams. I had taken their secret and turned it into a weapon. And I had detonated it in the most public, most damaging way possible. I had ruined her. I had ruined everything. So why didn't I feel victorious? The grim satisfaction I had felt at the party had evaporated, leaving a strange, hollow ache in its place. I had won. This was what winning felt like. But it didn't feel powerful. It didn't feel righteous. It just felt empty, lying there in the dark, in a stranger's room, with my phone turned off and my family in pieces. I had never felt more alone in my entire life. The silence was back, louder than ever, and this time, I had a terrifying suspicion that it was here to stay. The next 2 days were a blur of numb silence. I stayed holed up in Sarah's guest room, my phone still turned off, sitting like a black, dead stone on the nightstand. I slept for 10, 12 hours at a time. A heavy, dreamless sleep that offered no rest, only an escape. When I was awake, I'd just lie there, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, listening to the muffled sounds of Sarah and her roommates coming and going. The world outside my small room felt distant and unreal. It was like I had been unplugged from my own life. Sarah was a good friend. She didn't push. She'd knock softly on the door and leave a plate of food or a cup of tea on the dresser. Hey, she'd say quietly, just making sure you're still alive in there. I'd thank her, eat a few bites without tasting anything, and then retreat back into my cocoon of silence. On the third morning, I finally turned my phone back on. It took a full minute for the barrage of notifications to stop. Dozens of missed calls, over 50 text messages. Most were from my parents and Maya. A frantic mix of anger, pleading, and confusion. My mother's messages were short and sharp. Call me. Now. My father's were more direct. You need to come home and face what you've done. Maya's were a desperate, rambling stream of apologies, each one more pathetic than the last. Chloe, I'm so sorry. It was a mistake. I'll do anything. Please don't hate me. Please just talk to me. Reading her words didn't stir my anger. It didn't stir anything. It was like reading a letter meant for someone else. I deleted them all without replying. Then I methodically went through my contacts and blocked her number. I blocked Leo's. I blocked my parents and Aunt Carol and anyone else who might try to lecture me or plead her case. It was a digital amputation. Quick, clean, and brutal. I knew I couldn't hide at Sarah's forever. I needed clothes. I needed my laptop. I needed to face the apartment. I waited until I knew Maya would be out. Had mentioned a job interview at the mall. Before everything blew up. I hoped, for her sake, she still had the energy to go. Driving back to Mito or apartment building felt strange. The familiar street looked different, tainted. As I walked up the creaky stairs, my stomach twisted into a tight, anxious knot. The apartment was eerily quiet when I let myself in, but it wasn't empty. Maya was there, sitting on the couch in the dim light of the living room, surrounded by cardboard boxes. She was wearing my gray sweater, the one with the paint stain. It hung loosely on her small frame. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes were red-rimmed and puffy, and her face was pale and drawn. She looked up when I came in, and her expression was a heartbreaking mix of hope and fear. "Chloe," she whispered, her voice cracking. I ignored her. I walked straight past her to my bedroom and started pulling clothes out of my closet, stuffing them into a trash bag. I moved with a cold, efficient purpose, refusing to look at her, refusing to acknowledge her presence. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice trembling. She had followed me and was standing in the doorway of my room, watching me. "I'm packing," I said, my voice flat. "I'm moving out." Moving out. Panic flared in her eyes. "What are you talking about? Where are you going?" "Staying with Sarah for now," I said, not looking at her. I pulled my drawer open and started grabbing socks and underwear. "I'll figure out a more permanent plan later." "But what about the apartment? The lease isn't up for another 3 months. I can't afford this place by myself." I finally stopped. I turned to face her, the trash bag of my belongings clutched in my hand. For the first time, I let the full weight of my anger show in my eyes. "That sounds like a you problem. Maya, maybe your baby's father can help you out." "Oh, wait." I gave her a cruel, tight smile. "He ran away, didn't he? Guess you should have thought about that before you started sleeping with my boyfriend." The words hit her like a physical slap. She flinched, tears welling up in her eyes again. "It wasn't like that," she pleaded. "It only happened a couple of times. I was lonely, and he was there. And I was stupid. I know it was stupid. It was the biggest mistake of my life. A mistake is spilling coffee on your shirt," I said, my voice dangerously low. "A mistake is forgetting to pay the electric bill. Betraying the one person in the entire world who has always had your back. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. You chose him over me. Now you get to live with that choice. I'll fix it," she cried, desperation making her voice high and shrill. "I'll get an abortion. We can pretend this never happened. We can go back to how things were. Please, Chloe, I can't do this without you. I need you." The plea that would have once melted my heart now just filled me with a cold, hard disgust. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry she got caught. She was sorry her comfortable life was imploding. She wasn't trying to fix our relationship. She was trying to erase her consequences. "Go back." I laughed. A harsh, ugly sound. "There's no going back. Don't you get it? You broke it. It's broken forever." I grabbed my laptop from my desk and shoved it into my backpack. "As for the apartment, you have until the end of the month. That's when the next rent check is due. After that, it's not my problem anymore." I pushed past her, not gently. My shoulder knocked against hers. I walked into the living room, grabbing my purse and keys from the small table by the door. She followed me, sobbing openly now. Where am I supposed to go? Mom and Dad won't let me come home. They told me I wasn't welcome there anymore. I don't know. Maya, I said, my hand on the doorknob. I turned to look at her one last time, her face a blur of tears and despair. I felt a flicker of something, ghost of the protective big sister I used to be. But I crushed it, ruthlessly. And I don't care. I walked out the door and didn't look back. I closed it behind me, the click of the lock sounding final, like the door of a tomb. As I walked down the stairs, I could hear her cries through the thin wood, a desperate, animal sound of pure agony. For a single, fleeting moment, a wave of guilt so powerful it almost buckled my knees washed over me. What had I done? But then the anger returned, a righteous, burning wave that cauterized the wound. She had done this, not me. This was the consequence. This was her mess to clean up. The next few weeks were a strange limbo. I officially moved into Sarah's guest room. I went to work, smiled at customers, made lattes, and pretended my life wasn't a smoldering crater. I became an expert at saying I'm fine. People from my life, relatives, mutual friends, would try to approach me, their faces full of pity and morbid curiosity. I shut them all down with a cold politeness that left no room for questions. I heard things, through the grapevine. I couldn't avoid it entirely in a town as small as Brookfield. I heard that Maya had lost the apartment, just as I knew she would. I heard she had tried to go home, and my father had met her on the porch and told her to leave. I heard she was couch surfing, staying with different friends from high school, wearing out her welcome at each stop. I heard that Leo was completely off the grid. He had quit his job, and no one, not even his own parents, knew where he was. He had vanished, leaving Maya to face the fallout alone. Every piece of news was like a small, bitter confirmation that I had been right. She was getting what she deserved. He was showing his true colors. This was justice. That's what I told myself. Anyway, I repeated it like a mantra in the quiet moments, when the image of her crying face in our apartment doorway would flash in my mind. She deserved this. She did this to herself. One evening, I got a call from Aunt Carol. I had forgotten to block her number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me press the green button. Chloe, she said, her voice tight with disapproval. There was no preamble. I need to talk to you. I'm busy. Aunt Carol, I said. My tone clipped. Don't you dare hang up on me. She snapped. You owe me 5 minutes of your time. I saw your sister today. I said nothing. I just stood in Sarah's kitchen, staring out the window at the setting sun. She was at the grocery store. She was trying to buy a loaf of bread and a jar of peanut butter with loose change. Chloe. She looked thin. She looked scared. She looked like a child, an 18-year-old child who you threw out onto the street. What she does is not my problem anymore, I said, my voice colder than I intended. Not your problem? She exclaimed, her voice rising in disbelief. She is your sister, your blood, and you humiliated her. You abandoned her. All for what? For some worthless boy who wasn't worth a damn in the first place. Letting a man come between sisters is just nasty. Nasty business. Chloe. She was the one who let him come between us. I shot back, my knuckles white as I gripped the phone. She had it coming the second she decided to sleep with my boyfriend. And so you ruin her life? Is that the answer? She pressed, her voice relentless. Can you live with yourself if she ends up having this baby on the streets? Can you? Because that's where this is headed. Her question hit a nerve, a deep, buried one I had been refusing to acknowledge. Can you live with yourself? That has nothing to do with me, I said, but the words sounded weak, even to my own ears. It has everything to do with you, she said, her voice cracking with emotion. You held the match, Chloe. You can't just walk away and pretend you didn't start the fire. Whatever she did, she's still your sister, and she's alone, and she's pregnant, and she's terrified. You need to fix this. You fix it. I snarled, the anger returning, hot and defensive. If you're so concerned, why don't you take her in? You pick up the pieces, and you leave me alone." I hung up the phone before she could reply, my heart pounding in my chest. I stood there for a long time, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Her words echoed in my head. "You held the match. You can't just walk away and pretend you didn't start the fire." I had wanted to hurt her. I had wanted her to feel a fraction of the pain she had caused me. But this, a scared, hungry girl counting out change for peanut butter, a girl with nowhere to go. This wasn't what I had pictured. The clean, simple lines of justice were becoming blurry, complicated. The empty satisfaction I had felt was beginning to curdle into something that felt dangerously like guilt. Aunt Carol's words clung to me like burrs, sharp and irritating. I tried to shake them off, to bury them under the familiar weight of my anger. She made her bed. Now she has to lie in it. The old mantra felt flimsy now, a worn-out shield against a truth I didn't want to face. The image she had painted Maya, thin and scared, counting out loose change, was a stubborn ghost that haunted the edges of my thoughts. I threw myself into work, picking up extra shifts until I was running on caffeine and sheer willpower. I kept busy. I filled my days with the noise of the coffee grinder, the hiss of the steam wand, the endless chatter of customers. Noise was good. Noise kept the silence at bay. And in the silence, I could hear Aunt Carol's question, "Can you live with yourself?" One rainy afternoon, about a week after that phone call, Sarah came home from her classes and found me scrubbing the kitchen floor with a vengeance. "Ho," she said, setting her wet backpack down. "Bad day? Or did the floor personally offend you?" I didn't look up. "Just cleaning." She watched me for a moment, the frantic energy I was pouring into the mundane task. She came over and gently took the sponge from my hand. "Chloe, stop. The floor is dirty." I mumbled, trying to take it back. "The floor is fine. Talk to me." She sat down on one of the kitchen chairs, her expression serious. "You've been a wreck all week. You look like you haven't slept, and you're either working yourself to death or trying to scrub the finish off my floor. What's going on?" I finally sagged, the fake energy draining out of me. I leaned back against the cabinets and slid down to the floor, my shoulders slumping in defeat. Aunt Carol called me. I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. She saw Maya. I told her what my aunt had said. I described the image of Maya at the grocery store, the words feeling like stones in my mouth. When I was done, I stared at the linoleum, unable to meet Sarah's eyes, bracing myself for her to say "I told you so" or to agree with my aunt. Instead, she was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was gentle. "That's rough," she said. "I'm sorry you had to hear that." She said I ruined her life. I said, picking at a loose thread on my jeans. She said I started the fire and now I'm just walking away from it. "And what do you think?" Sarah asked, her question simple and direct. I looked up at her, surprised. I think Maya is the one who had the affair. I think Leo is the one who ran away. I think my parents are the ones who kicked her out. Why is this all on me?" My voice grew stronger, fueled by a familiar indignation. "I'm the victim here. She slept with my boyfriend. Why does everyone seem to forget that?" "Nobody is forgetting that, Chloe," Sarah said calmly. "What she and Leo did was awful. It was a terrible, unforgivable betrayal. You had every right to be angry. You had every right to end your relationship with both of them." She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine. "But you didn't just end it. You chose to blow it up on a launchpad in front of 30 people. You chose to humiliate her. You chose to make sure she had absolutely no one to turn to. That wasn't about the betrayal. That was about revenge." Her words were quiet, but they hit me with the force of a physical blow. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't judging. She was just stating a fact I had been desperately trying to avoid. "You won, Chloe," she continued softly. "You got your revenge. You hurt her worse than she hurt you. You destroyed her relationship with our family. You made sure she was completely alone. So, here's the real question. You got everything you wanted. Do you feel better? Do you feel better? The question echoed in the silent kitchen. And the answer, the terrible, honest-to-God answer, was no. I didn't feel better. I felt empty. I felt haunted. The righteous anger that had sustained me for weeks felt thin and brittle, and underneath it was a deep, aching grief. Grief for the sister I had lost, for the life we used to have, and a new, terrifying feeling was creeping in around the edges. Shame. No, I whispered, the admission costing me more than I could have imagined. Tears I didn't know I had in me began to well up, hot and stinging. No, I don't. Sarah's expression softened into one of deep sympathy. She didn't say anything else. She just got up, made 2 cups of tea, and sat on the floor with me while I finally cried. I cried for my broken heart, for my lost sister, for the happy, naive girl I had been just a few months ago. And I cried because I had become someone I didn't recognize, a person who could inflict so much pain on someone she loved and call it justice. The dam had broken. Admitting the truth out loud, even just to Sarah, changed everything. The anger was still there, a hard, bitter knot in my chest, but it wasn't the only thing anymore. It now shared space with a heavy, suffocating guilt. I couldn't unhear Aunt Carol's words. I couldn't unsee the image of my sister, alone and destitute, and I couldn't unknow the truth of what Sarah had said. I had wanted revenge, and I had gotten it. This was the price. A few days later, I was at work, going through the motions of the morning rush. My hands were on autopilot, grinding beans, steaming milk, calling out orders. My mind was somewhere else entirely, replaying my conversation with Sarah. It was in this distracted state that I looked up and saw her. Maya was standing across the street, huddled under the narrow awning of a closed bookstore, trying to stay out of the drizzle that had just started. She was staring at the coffee shop, at me. Even from this distance, I could see how much she had changed. Her face was thinner, her cheeks hollowed out. She was wearing a thin hoodie that looked too big for her, and she had her arms wrapped around herself, as if for warmth, or maybe just to hold herself together. She looked fragile. She looked homeless. My heart gave a painful lurch. My hands froze on the cup I was holding. For a long, stretched out moment, we just looked at each other from across the street. Her eyes were wide and pleading. I could see the question in them. I could see the desperate, flickering hope. Someone behind me cleared their throat. "Excuse me, my vanilla latte?" The sound snapped me back to reality. I turned away from the window, my face burning. "Right, sorry," I mumbled, handing the customer her drink. When I looked back, Maya was gone. She had vanished back into the city, like a ghost, but the image of her was burned into my mind. The hollow cheeks, the desperate eyes, the way she hugged herself against the cold. This was my handiwork. This was the result of the fire I had started. Sarah's voice echoed in my head. "You won, Chloe." That evening, I couldn't shake the image of her. It followed me home. It sat with me at the dinner table while I pushed food around my plate. It lay with me in the dark when I tried to sleep. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in over a month. I unblocked her number. I stared at the blank message screen for a long time, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. What could I even say? "I'm sorry I ruined your life. Hope you're not starving." Every option felt hollow and absurd. In the end, I typed out a simple, stark message, "Are you okay?" I hit send before I could second-guess myself, my heart pounding. The reply came almost instantly, as if she had been sitting there, waiting, holding her breath for weeks. No, just that one word. It was so simple, so devoid of excuses or pleas. It was just the raw, unvarnished truth, and it broke through the last of my defenses. The anger, the pride, the self-righteousness, it all crumbled away, leaving behind the stark reality of the situation. My little sister was not okay, and I was a big reason why. My fingers trembled as I typed my next message. "Where are you?" "Staying with Ashley, the girl from my bio class." A pause, then another message. But her parents said I have to be out by tomorrow. Out on the street. Carol's prediction was coming true. The image of Maya, pregnant and sleeping in a park, flashed in my mind, stark and terrifying. I took a deep breath. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know if this was forgiveness or just damage control. All I knew was that I couldn't live with myself if I did nothing. Stay there. I typed, I'm coming to get you. The 3 dots appeared and disappeared for a long time. Finally, a single message came through. Okay. I stood up from Sarah's kitchen table, my mind racing. I was about to walk back into the heart of the mess I had created. I didn't know if we could ever fix what was broken between us. It felt too big, too shattered. But as I grabbed my car keys, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I couldn't let my sister face this alone anymore. Not even if she deserved it. Not even if I still hated her. Because somewhere, buried deep beneath all the pain and betrayal, she was still Maya. She was still my little sister. And I was the only person she had left. Ashley from bio class lived in a cramped, 3rd-floor apartment on the other side of town, in a neighborhood I usually avoided. The building smelled like stale cigarette smoke and damp carpet. As I climbed the stairs, my heart hammered against my ribs with a nervous, unsteady rhythm. What was I doing? What was I going to say to her? The words I had typed so decisively on my phoneme coming to get you felt reckless and impulsive now. I had a terrible feeling I was walking into a room full of ghosts, and I wasn't sure I was ready to face them. The door to apartment 3B was already ajar. I pushed it open gently and peered inside. The apartment was a mess of overflowing ashtrays and pizza boxes. And there, sitting on a lumpy couch, was Maya. She was holding her phone in her hands, staring at it as if it might vanish. A single, beat-up duffel bag sat on the floor at her feet. That was it. That was everything she had left in the world. She looked up as I stepped inside, and her eyes, which I had last seen filled with pleading from across a rainy street, were now wide with a fragile, uncertain hope. She looked smaller than I remembered, swallowed up by the oversized hoodie. Her pregnancy was barely visible, a slight roundness to her stomach that was almost lost in the baggy clothes. Chloe, she breathed. I couldn't find any words. We just stared at each other for a long moment, the air thick with everything that had happened between us. The betrayal, the lies, the public humiliation, the bitter, angry weeks of silence. It was all there, a chasm separating us. I cleared my throat. Is this all your stuff? I asked, my voice coming out hoarse. I gestured towards the sad little duffel bag. She nodded, her eyes still fixed on my face, as if afraid I might disappear if she looked away. Okay, I said, the word feeling inadequate. Let's go. The ride back to Sarah's house was suffocatingly quiet. Maya sat in the passenger seat, rigid and silent, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She kept her eyes fixed on the window, watching the dreary, rain-slicked streets of Brookfield go by. I focused on the road, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, my mind a blank static. What were the rules for this? How do you make small talk with the sister whose life you systematically dismantled? So, how's the whole homeless and pregnant thing working out for you? When we got to Sarah's, I led her inside. Sarah was at the kitchen table, studying. She looked up, saw Maya trailing behind me, and her eyes widened in surprise. To her credit, she recovered quickly. She gave Maya a small, kind smile. Hi, Maya, she said gently. Hi, Maya mumbled, looking at the floor. You can stay in my room for now, I said, breaking the awkward silence. It wasn't the guest room. I didn't want her in there, where I had hidden from the world. I wanted her in my space, where I couldn't ignore her. It felt like a necessary penance. I'll take the couch. She just nodded, still not looking at me. I showed her to my room, which for the past month had been the guest room, but now felt like it was mine again, and she placed her duffel bag on the floor. The room suddenly felt very small. Are you hungry? I asked, my voice stiff. I can make you something. I'm okay. She whispered. You don't look okay. I said, the words sharper than I intended. You look like you haven't eaten in a week. I'll make you some soup. I left her there and went to the kitchen, my hands shaking slightly as I pulled a can of tomato soup from the pantry. I was acting on some strange, buried instinct, the big sister instinct, the one that told me to feed her, to make sure she was warm, to take care of her. It was at war with the other part of me, the angry, betrayed part that wanted to scream at her, that wanted to demand answers, that wanted her to feel the pain I still felt. I brought the soup into the bedroom on a tray. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, looking lost. She took the bowl from me, her fingers brushing against mine. The brief contact was like an electric shock. I pulled my hand back quickly. She ate in silence, slowly and deliberately, as if she were afraid the food might be taken away. When she was finished, she placed the empty bowl back on the tray. "Thank you," she said, her voice small. "You're welcome," I replied, my tone formal. We sat in silence again, the space between us humming with tension. I needed to say something. I needed to break this unbearable quiet. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, the question I had been holding inside for weeks finally spilling out. "Before all this, when you first found out, why didn't you just come to me?" She finally looked at me, and her eyes were filled with a deep, bottomless shame. "I was scared," she whispered. "I was so scared of what you would think, of what Mom and Dad would do, of everything. Scared of me? The idea was so foreign. She had never been scared of me. I knew what I did was wrong." "Chloe," she said, tears starting to slide down her cheeks. "I knew it was the worst thing I could ever do to you. And every day, I woke up hating myself for it. Telling you felt like my whole world would end. And I guess," she gave a small, watery, humorless laugh, "I was right. What you did with Leo," I started, my voice tight. "How could you?" "I don't know," she sobbed, wrapping her arms around her stomach. "I don't have an excuse. He was just there. You were working all the time. And I was lonely. And he paid attention to me. He made me feel special. And I was stupid and selfish. And I let it happen. I hate myself for it. I hate myself every single second of every day." Her confession wasn't an excuse, and she knew it. It was just a sad, pathetic explanation. And for the first time, listening to her, I didn't feel the hot flash of anger. I just felt a profound, weary sadness. We were just two stupid, heartbroken kids who had made a catastrophic mess. "I'm going to get an abortion," she said suddenly, her voice flat and devoid of emotion. "I already looked up a clinic. I can go next week. Then this will all be over. I can get a job, and I'll pay you back for everything. And we can." Her voice trailed off. We both knew the end of that sentence was a lie. There was no going back to the way things were. "Is that what you want?" I asked quietly. She shrugged, a tear splashing onto her hand. "It doesn't matter what I want. It's the only way to fix this. To fix this. To fix the mess." She wasn't talking about what she wanted for her body, for her future. She was talking about it as a solution to a problem. The problem of her own existence, the way Leo had talked about it. A clinic or something. Nobody has to know. And a cold dread washed over me. This was the corner I had backed her into. A place where she felt her only option was to erase a part of herself, to make things easier for everyone else. "Maya," I said, my voice soft, "this is your decision. Not mine. Not Mom and Dad's. Yours. You can't do it just to try and make things right with me. But it's the only way." She insisted, her voice rising with a desperate edge. "If I don't, you'll still hate me. Mom and Dad will never talk to me again. And I'll be all alone with a baby. How am I supposed to do that?" She was right. She was completely, utterly right. And the weight of my own cruelty settled on me, heavy as a shroud. My revenge hadn't just been about exposing her. It had stripped her of her entire support system, leaving her with no viable choices. I had wanted to hurt her, and in my rage, I had taken away her future. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. I picked it up. "This is Melissa, Leo's mom. Can you please call me? It's about Leo." A knot of ice formed in my stomach. I hadn't thought about Leo in weeks, except as a faceless coward. I had no idea what his parents must be going through. I looked at Maya, her face pale and tear-streaked. "It's Leo's mom," I said. Maya's head snapped up, a flicker of something hope, fear, in her eyes. I stepped out into the hallway and dialed the number, my heart pounding. "Hello," a woman's voice, ragged with exhaustion. "Melissa, it's Chloe Miller." "Oh, Chloe. Thank you for calling." She sounded like she was on the verge of tears. I'm sorry to bother you. I know you must hate us right now. Hate him. And you have every right to. But I'm so worried. Is he okay?" I asked, a strange, protective instinct kicking in even for him. "He's in Florida," she said, "staying with his aunt. He won't talk to us. He won't talk to anyone. He just ran. He told his father he's never coming back to Pennsylvania. He said," her voice broke into a sob, "he said this whole thing, the baby, it's not his problem. He wants nothing to do with it. He said Maya should just take care of it. It's not his problem." The confirmation was like a punch to the gut. The final, cowardly nail in the coffin. He was gone. He was never coming back. He had washed his hands of the entire mess, leaving Maya to drown in it. I ended the call, my mind reeling. I walked back into the bedroom. Maya was looking at me, her eyes wide and questioning. "He's in Florida," I said, my voice flat. "He's not coming back. He told his mom he wants nothing to do with you or the baby." I watched as the last, tiny flicker of hope died in her eyes. It was a brutal, devastating thing to see. Whatever small part of her had been holding onto the fantasy that he would come back, that he would step up, that he would help her, it was gone. She was well and truly, completely on her own. Except she wasn't. She had me. The thought was terrifying. And in that moment, standing in the wreckage of both our lives, I had to make a choice. I could leave her there to deal with the fallout alone, which is what my anger told me she deserved, or I could stay. I could face the consequences of my own actions, the consequences of my brutal, public revenge. I looked at my little sister, who was now quietly crying, her shoulders shaking with the silent, hopeless sobs of someone who has just lost everything. And I knew I couldn't walk away again. The fire I had started was still burning, and it was threatening to consume us both. It was my responsibility to help put it out. My phone buzzed again, a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but some instinct made me answer. "Hello, is this Chloe Miller?" A brisk, professional voice asked. "Yes. Who is this?" "This is Nurse Patterson from Brookfield General Hospital. I'm calling about your sister, Maya Miller. There's been an incident. She collapsed. We need you to come down to the emergency room right away." The world dropped out from under my feet. Collapsed. What did that mean? I looked at Maya, who was sitting on the bed, sobbing. But she was here. She was right in front of me. The timeline didn't make sense. And then, a sickening realization washed over me. The call from Leo's mom. Maya seeing me from across the street. This hadn't all happened today. This had happened before I had finally reached out. How long had she been alone after he had officially abandoned her? How long had she been carrying that final, crushing weight by herself? The nurse on the phone wasn't talking about now. She was talking about then. The call was a ghost, a message delayed, a final, horrifying piece of the puzzle clicking into place. The moment that had finally broken her. The moment she had hit rock bottom had missed it. I had been stewing in my own anger while my sister was collapsing in the street. The nurse's words didn't make sense. I was looking right at Maya, sitting on my bed, crying. She was here. She was safe. "I think you have the wrong number," I said, my voice shaking. "My sister is right here with me." "Ma'am." The nurse's voice was patient, but firm. I'm looking at her intake form. "We admitted Maya Miller this morning. She was brought in by ambulance after she collapsed outside the Daily Grind coffee shop. Her emergency contact was listed as you. This morning, the blood drained from my face. The scene replayed in my mind with horrifying clarity. Maya, huddled under the awning. Her thin, pale face, the way she had just vanished. She hadn't just walked away. She had collapsed. Someone must have found her. Someone else had taken care of her while I was turning my back, serving lattes. The call I was receiving now wasn't a ghost. I had misunderstood everything. The call from Leo's mom. My decision to text Maya that hadn't happened days ago. That was this morning. A frantic series of events compressed into a few hours. My perception of time warped by the shock. Maya wasn't at Ashley's house now. She was in the hospital. The girl on my bed wasn't real. She was a memory. She was a ghost of guilt. A projection of the conversation I desperately wished we could have had. I'm on my way. I choked out, hanging up the phone. The image of Maya in my room flickered and dissolved, leaving only the empty bed and the lingering scent of my own shampoo. I grabbed my keys, my hands trembling so badly I could barely fit the key into the ignition. My mind was a chaotic storm of panic and self-recrimination. She collapsed. She was trying to see me. She was right there, and I let her walk away. The drive to Brookfield General was a 5-minute trip that felt like an eternity. I ran through the automatic doors of the emergency room, my heart pounding in my ears. The air smelled of antiseptic and fear. I rushed to the front desk, my words tumbling out in a frantic stream. I'm here for my sister, Maya Miller. I just got a call. She was brought in this morning. The receptionist, a calm, middle-aged woman with tired eyes, typed something into her computer. She's been moved to a room on the 3rd floor. Obstetrics ward. Room 312. You can go on up. Obstetrics. The word hit me like a physical blow. The baby. Of course. I thanked her numbly and rushed to the elevators, my stomach churning. What if something was wrong? What if her collapse had hurt the baby? What if I had waited too long to help? I found room 312 and hesitated at the door, my hand hovering over the handle. I took a deep breath and pushed it open. The room was small and dim. Maya was lying in the hospital bed, hooked up to an IV drip. She looked incredibly small and fragile against the crisp white sheets. Her dark hair fanned out on the pillow. Her eyes were closed, her face pale and still. For a terrifying second, I thought she was, but then I saw the slow, steady rise and fall of her chest. She was just sleeping. I pulled a plastic chair up to the side of her bed and just sat there, watching her breathe. The anger, the hatred, the desire for revenge, I'd all felt so petty and insignificant now. It had all been burned away by the stark, terrifying fear of almost losing her. Looking at her now, so vulnerable and broken, I couldn't see the girl who had betrayed me. I could only see Maya, my little sister, the one I was supposed to protect. A doctor came in a little while later, a kind-looking woman with graying hair. She introduced herself as Dr. Evans. You must be Chloe, she said, giving me a warm, reassuring smile. I'm glad you're here. Your sister was asking for you when she woke up. Is she okay? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The baby, they're both going to be fine, she said. And I felt a wave of relief so powerful my knees went weak. Maya was suffering from severe dehydration and malnutrition. It seems she hasn't been eating properly for some time. Her blood pressure was dangerously low, which is why she fainted. But we have her on fluids now, and her vitals are stabilizing. Malnutrition. The word echoed Aunt Carol's story, counting out change for bread and peanut butter. It wasn't just a story. It was real. And the baby is fine. Dr. Evans continued, looking at her chart. Strong heartbeat. She's about 12 weeks along. For now, everything looks perfectly healthy. But she needs to start taking care of herself. For both their sakes. The doctor left, and I was alone with Maya again. She stirred a few minutes later, her eyelids fluttering open. Her eyes, hazy with sleep, found mine. There was no fear in them this time, just a deep, weary sadness. "You came," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I came," I confirmed, my own voice thick with emotion. We didn't say anything for a long time. There was nothing to say. The apologies and accusations felt pointless. All that mattered was that we were here, in this quiet, sterile room, and the silence between us was no longer angry. It was just as sad. "I heard the heartbeat," she said softly, her hand drifting down to rest on her still flat stomach. "When they did the ultrasound, it was so fast." A single tear slid from the corner of her eye and traced a path down her temple. It was real. I reached out, my hand moving on its own, and covered her hand with mine. Her skin was cool to the touch. It was the first time we had touched in what felt like a lifetime. "I'm sorry, Chloe," she whispered, her eyes meeting mine. And this time, it sounded different. It wasn't the desperate, panicked apology of a girl trying to avoid consequences. It was the quiet, broken apology of someone who finally understood the depth of the pain she had caused. "I'm so sorry for what I did to you. To us. I know," I said. And to my own surprise, I realized that I believed her. "I'm sorry too, Maya." Her brow furrowed in confusion. "For what?" "For what I did at the party," I said, the confession tasting like poison. "It was cruel. I wanted to hurt you, and I did. I didn't care what happened to you afterwards. I was so angry. I didn't care. And I'm sorry for that. I'm so sorry." She started to cry then. Not the loud, hysterical sobs from the party, but quiet, shuddering tears of grief and relief. I didn't let go of her hand. I just sat there, holding on, as she cried for both of us. We didn't fix everything in that hospital room. We didn't magically erase the betrayal or the pain. The words "I forgive you" were not spoken, because we both knew it wasn't that simple. Forgiveness wasn't a word. It was an action. It was a choice you had to keep making, every single day. And sitting there, holding my sister's hand, I made the choice to start. When she was discharged the next day, I took her back to Sarah's house. I didn't take her to my room this time. I took her to the guest room. I made it up with clean sheets and brought her a glass of water. It was a neutral space, a place for her to heal, separate from my own complicated feelings. The first thing I did was drive to the pharmacy and fill the prescription for the prenatal vitamins the doctor had given her. The second thing I did was go to the grocery store. I bought milk, eggs, fresh fruit, chicken, and vegetables. I filled the refrigerator with real food. As I put the groceries away, I knew this was just the first step on a long, uncertain road. That evening, I did the hardest thing I'd had to do yet. I unblocked my parents' numbers and called my mom. "Chloe," she answered, her voice wary. "Hi, Mom," I said, trying to keep my own voice steady. "I'm calling about Maya. Is she all right?" The immediate concern in her voice was a small comfort. "She is now," I said, and I told her everything. About the collapse, the hospital, the malnutrition. I didn't embellish. I just stated the facts, letting them speak for themselves. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, soft and shaky. "Oh, my God," she whispered finally, the sound full of a mother's pain. "Our baby girl. She's staying with me now," I said. "But we need help. Mom, I can't do this by myself. And she needs her parents. I'll talk to your father," she said, her voice gaining a new resolve. "I'm coming over. What's the address?" I knew the battle wasn't over. I knew my father's pride was a fortress that wouldn't crumble easily. But hearing the determination in my mother's voice, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could start to rebuild. Not just me and Maya, but all of us. The fire I had started had burned our family to the ground. But now, in the ashes, a few stubborn green shoots were starting to push their way towards the light. My mother arrived less than an hour later. When I opened the door, she stood on the porch for a moment, her eyes searching mine. full of a million questions I didn't have the answers to. Then she pulled me into a fierce, tight hug that said everything she couldn't. It was a hug of relief, of regret, of a deep, aching love that had been bruised but not broken. "Where is she?" She whispered into my hair. I led her to the guest room. Maya was sitting up in bed, looking small and nervous. When she saw our mother, her face crumpled, and she let out a small sob. My mom crossed the room in 3 quick strides and gathered Maya into her arms, stroking her hair, murmuring soft, soothing words in her ear. "It's okay, baby. I'm here now. It's all going to be okay." Watching them, I felt a knot I didn't even know I was carrying begin to loosen in my chest. This was what she had needed all along. Not just my reluctant help, but a mother's unconditional love. My revenge had taken that from her. Now, I was helping her get it back. My mom stayed for hours. She didn't ask about Leo. She didn't lecture Maya about her choices. She just sat on the bed with her, holding her hand, asking about the baby, making her promise to eat, and telling her over and over again that she was loved. When she finally left, promising to come back the next day after she'd had a word with my father, the atmosphere in the little house felt lighter, less suffocating. Hope had come in and sat down. The conversation with my dad, as my mom later recounted, was a battle. His pride and anger were formidable walls, but my mother's resolve, fortified by the sight of her sick and scared daughter, was stronger. In the end, it wasn't a dramatic, tearful reconciliation. It was a quiet, reluctant surrender. He agreed, grudgingly at first, to let Maya come home, not because he had forgiven her, but because, as my mom put it, she is our daughter, Robert, and she is carrying our grandchild. We will not abandon them. So Maya moved back into her childhood bedroom. It was awkward and strained at first. My father was stiff and formal with her, his disappointment a constant, heavy presence in the house. But my mother was a relentless force of healing. She cooked Maya's favorite meals. She made sure she took her vitamins. She started knitting a tiny yellow blanket. Slowly, painstakingly, she began to stitch our broken family back together. I didn't move back home, and I didn't move back in with Maya. I stayed at Sarah's, and eventually, we and another friend found a new, bigger apartment together. The space between me and Maya felt necessary. We couldn't go back to the way we were, living in each other's pockets, our lives completely intertwined. Too much had happened. We needed room to breathe, to figure out who we were without each other. But we started to build something new. I would go over to my parents' house for dinner once a week. I'd sit with Maya on the back porch, and we'd talk. Not about the betrayal, not about Leo. We talked about the baby. We talked about her morning sickness. We talked about her plans to enroll in online classes at the community college. After the baby was born, the conversations were sometimes stilted, punctuated by long silences, but they were real. They were a start. One afternoon, I went with her to a doctor's appointment. It was time for the 20-week ultrasound, the one where they could tell the gender. We sat in the dark, sterile room and watched the grainy black and white image appear on the screen. And then we heard a strong, steady, rhythmic whooshing, the sound of a tiny, perfect heartbeat, filling the room. The technician moved the wand over Maya's belly. "And there's the head," she said cheerfully, "and a little hand. Looks like it's waving at you." Maya laughed, a genuine, happy sound I hadn't heard in months. "Hi, baby," she whispered. "Would you like to know the gender?" the technician asked. Maya looked at me, her eyes shining. I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. "It's a girl," the technician announced. "A girl." I looked at Maya, and she was crying. But these weren't the tears of shame or fear I had grown so used to seeing. These were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. In that moment, watching my sister fall completely in love with the little life growing inside of her, the last of my bitterness finally washed away. This tiny, unborn girl hadn't asked for any of this. She was an innocent bystander in the wreckage we had created. And she deserved the world. She deserved a family. As we left the clinic, walking out into the bright afternoon sun, Maya stopped and turned to me. "Thank you for coming with me, Chloe." "Of course," I said. She hesitated for a moment, then reached out and squeezed my hand. "I know things will probably never be the same as they were before," she said, her voice soft, "but I'm really glad you're my sister." "Me too," I said, and my own eyes filled with tears. I squeezed her hand back. The next few months were a quiet process of healing. My father slowly thawed. The first time he referred to the baby as my granddaughter, my mom and I exchanged a look of silent, tearful victory. Maya blossomed. With the support of her family, the fear was replaced by a quiet confidence. She was going to be a good mom. We all knew it. There was no word from Leo. He remained a ghost, a cautionary tale. Sometimes I felt a flicker of anger towards him, but mostly, I just felt a distant pity. He had run away from the hardest thing in his life, and in doing so, he had missed out on the most beautiful part of it. His daughter would grow up without him, but she would not grow up without love. She would be surrounded by it. The baby, who they named Lily, was born on a crisp day in early February. I was in the delivery room, along with my mom. I stood by Maya's side, holding her hand, telling her she could do it, just like I had always done. And when the nurse placed that tiny, screaming, beautiful little girl into my sister's arms, the world seemed to shift on its axis. Everything, the pain, the anger, the betrayal, it all faded into the background. All that was left was this perfect, new beginning. My relationship with Maya isn't what it used to be. The easy, unthinking trust of our youth is gone, replaced by something more cautious, more deliberate. There's a scar there, a reminder of the damage we did to each other. But scars heal. They fade. And what we're building in its place is stronger. In a way, it's a relationship forged not in innocence, but in the fires of a terrible mistake. It's built on the hard-won knowledge that family is not something that is unbreakable. It's something you have to choose to rebuild, piece by painful piece, every single day. Sometimes, when I'm holding my niece, her tiny fingers wrapped around one of mine, I think about that 4th of July party. I think about the girl I was that day, so full of cold, righteous anger. I barely recognize her now. I had wanted revenge. I had wanted justice. But what I learned, lying in the ashes of the life I had burned down, is that sometimes the most courageous and powerful thing you can do is not to win, but to forgive. Not for their sake, but for your own. It's the only way to truly put out the fire.